he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Moman2100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. So we don't have to talk about the Giants this week. They're on the bye going into gather round, and we also won't have to talk about too much about the Wanderers women's team because they're also on the bye, but it's also the last week of the regular season in the A-League women's competition. So we'll know what the result will be, whether it will be the Wanderers or Sydney FC with the wooden spoon by the end of this weekend. But obviously, got a huge lot of stuff to talk about. Obviously, we got the Cubs talking about them, obviously at home and away in their regular season games. Obviously, we'll talk about that in the miscellaneous stuff. We've got the Titans going up against Big Brother in the Brisbane Broncos at home. So, huge contest for them after their first win last week. We also got to talk about the Wanderers men's team. They go to Amy Park, and I was going to say go to Melbourne. I was going to say to go to Adelaide, but they go to Melbourne to play against Melbourne City and Liverpool. Obviously, in the FA Cup, in the men's team, they go up against Manchester City in their fixture at Etihad Stadium. So that is going to be a huge clash for them. Obviously, quarterfinal in terms of the FA Cup. And obviously the women's competition, they're also doing the FA Cup this weekend as well. They go up against Charlton Athletic as well. So huge slate of things to talk about. Obviously we don't have to talk about too much. We'll talk about the AFL table as well. So we'll kind of talk about the Giants, probably as much as the Wanderers women's team. But yeah, let's get started because it's going to be a huge episode once again. So it's Sunday morning. We had a few games yesterday. We had the Wanderers, the Titans, and obviously very late we had Liverpool as well playing, as well as obviously Sydney FC in the women's competition, which obviously mattered to the Wanderers in terms of result, and we'll get to that eventually. But let's start with the Wanderers men's team, because I don't usually start with them, but in terms of the results, it doesn't really matter. With this game in particular, obviously we went up against Melbourne City away from home. Obviously the Wanderers still at the bottom of the ladder at the point of playing this game, looking to try and get some points to get off the bottom. And yeah, the effort was not there. It was a 3-0 loss to Melbourne City for the Wanderers. 2-0 at half-time. So they scored through Couen in the 23rd minute, Marcus Eunice in the 33rd minute, and Rashini in the 49th minute. In terms of the stats of the match, 52% possession to the Wanderers, to 48 for Melbourne City, 17 shots to 15 in favour of the Wanderers, 4 shots on target for the Wanderers, 8 on target for Melbourne City. So accuracy in terms of shooting, 24%. For the Wanderers, 53% for Melbourne City. Stats pretty similar in a lot of regards, but there was one red card towards the end of the game for Melbourne City, which you would have thought we would have had a situation where we've been able to claw maybe a goal or two back, and we didn't do that. We didn't do that at all, and I don't think the effort was there at all for this team, and it has. It's pretty awful. Awful effort once again from this team, and I think the way this team's just collecting paychecks at the moment. I don't know if, ultimately some people could blame the coach, and maybe the coach has a little bit of blame in this, but I think a lot of it is the players. It's just the fact that they can't score. This is the 7th game of the 23 games that we've played that we've failed to score at least one goal, and only Sydney FC and Perth Glory have failed to score more times this season in games, with 8. So literally we've got, 3 or 4 games left. Obviously Sydney FC and Perth Glory still got to play games at this point as well as the Wanderers, but, we can't apparently shoot for goals in games, but apparently, someone like Costa Barbarouses, who, big signing for this club over the off-season this season, can score for New Zealand, which would be much harder to do in international football than in, domestic competition, but apparently, in terms of the A-League, because obviously, yes, the competition is fierce in the A-League, but compared to, the EPL, La Liga, MLS, and a lot of the other competitions, doesn't really factor in at the top. But yeah, they can't even fucking score one goal in games, and it's awful because, again, that still leaves Wanderers on the bottom of the ladder with 21 points. And yeah, they're languishing at the bottom. Obviously, the teams at the bottom actually are getting points as well. Obviously, 3 points adrift now, with Perth Glory getting a draw themselves, a 2-2 draw after being up 2-0 in their game, but Mariners did work back, and Brisbane Roar ended up getting a scoreless draw as well. So Perth are 3 points adrift, and Brisbane are 4 points adrift from the bottom of the ladder. So the Wanderers looking like they're going to get the wooden spoon, and honestly, I feel like they deserve it. They have not put in the effort at all. There's only a couple of players in this team that have actually put effort in all season long, and most of those have been mid-season transfers. Ryan Fraser, he's a guy that's been there, maybe a couple of months now, and has practically played in most of the games since he got transferred over, and he's arguably been one of their best players, if not their best player. Scaluna also has had a few awful games. Ryan Fraser's had a few average games as well. But Scaluna, when he's been in the side, he's been great. Hibakishi, he's been playing well. Everybody else, including Lawrence Thomas, has been playing like absolute fucking dog shit. And I'm sick of it. So the Wanderers, you can basically put your pen to paper on having the wooden spoon this season, because, my God, the effort is not there. The effort is not showing at all. And you know what? Thank God that we only have 3 games left this season, because, my God, they're playing like absolute dog trash. And going into the next game is the Sydney Derby, and Sydney FC are at the helm of actually belting us on Saturday. Again, the second fixture running. And it's sickening, because we're playing at home, we're playing at CommBank, and we should have more confidence going into this game, and we should be winning more games. We have the talent there. It's not like the talent is not there in terms of defence, in terms of the midfield, in terms of the forwards and the strikers, in terms of the interchange bench. It's bullshit. And I swear they're just getting contracts and just taking contracts, and with obviously a new coach coming in, which is obviously was the coach for Sydney FC this season, that only just obviously departed a couple of weeks ago. I know that he's coming over the divide from Sydney FC to the Wanderers, but unless it is a huge clean out of this team, including Lawrence Thomas, I'm sorry, but Lawrence Thomas as captain has not worked at all season long, and he's been a very average goalkeeper at most. He's been awful. So we got Sydney FC, and we're probably going to get belted 5-0, if not 5-1 again. Then playing Wellington, who are playing relatively well, and then we're playing Victory. And all 3 of those teams right now are fighting for final spots because Victory at the moment are in 4th position, Sydney FC are in 5th position right now, and Wellington are in 9th position, but they're still in with a shot to make finals. They've got 3 games left and they're 4 points behind MacArthur in 6th position. So it's not a situation where they don't have a chance to make the finals at this point. Obviously, it's in terms of Wellington, it's going to be a bit of a struggle for them to get there, but they can manage to get there still. But yeah, the Wanderers, no effort, pretty much dog shit, and just collecting paychecks for the sake of collecting paychecks at the moment because they're not putting in the effort. And the fans probably just don't show up to the Sydney Derby at all. Red and black block shouldn't show up for the Derby. Shouldn't show up in the next 2 games as well. Shouldn't show up for the Wanderers because goddamn, this team has been absolute dog shit. And I hate saying that against teams, like especially teams that I really, really favour, but they are playing like it. They're not playing like a professional team, and they're playing like they're witches' hats at the moment. It is awful to see, and this team has been an absolute disappointment. In terms of the season, it's been an absolute travesty. It's been a fucking train wreck, and I'm sick of seeing it. I'm honestly sick of seeing it. It is pitiful, and the effort is not showing at all. They're not putting the effort in, and obviously the results are not coming through, and that makes sense because they're not putting the effort in. Especially the experienced players, even players like, say, Costa Barbarouses that have been there at the Wanderers, if not once, like for one big stint, multiple stints at this team. Doesn't make sense. Team on paper, and I guess it's one of those things that stands out of the team on paper is not the team that you put on the field. The quality of football is not there for this team, and I'm sick of seeing it. And honestly, with other games going on, I'd rather see the Giants. Yes, they're struggling right now, but with injuries especially, but they're playing some exciting football. I'd rather see Liverpool, despite their struggles, in many competitions all throughout this season in the Premier League and elsewhere. I'd see them because they'd be a bit more exciting. I'd see the Titans, even though they've struggled this season so far, even struggling with their first win last week. We're in a situation where there is exciting football. In fact, it even was exciting against the game of the Dolphins. So, it is a situation where they're much more exciting teams, including even the Wanderers women's team. All of 2026, they've turned things around. They've really turned things around and are fighting for a situation to get off the bottom of the ladder. And they did that week in, week out, most weeks since 2026 started. And ultimately, they're much more enjoyable to watch than the Wanderers men's right now. The Wanderers men's team, arguably, in terms of the season, in terms of any season in the A-League, I would say it's probably going to be hands down one of the worst sides in the A-League history that has been put on the field for a full season. It is pitiful on what they're doing, and even with we're talking about Gold Coast United, we're talking about North Queensland Fury, some of the teams that have been in the competition and have absolved, obviously. Western United obviously being in that limbo period right now. There's been seasons with those teams that have been really, really bad. But ultimately, I feel like even with those teams, they've had games and they've had stretches of games where they've really been competitive and really looking good. And this Wanderers team all year long has been a far cry from that. In fact, arguably, I would go down as it being at least top 3, if not the worst side that has ever played in the A-League. And I hate I'm not sugarcoating that because their effort has been absolutely atrocious. And it's only mid-season transfers and trades that have actually helped us actually win some games this season. Because if we didn't have those, if we didn't have Ryan Fraser, if we didn't have Scaluna coming in through the academy, we didn't have some other transfers coming through, we would probably only have won maybe 2 games, maybe 3 if we're lucky. I think we've only won 5 games this year, and we've drew a few games. And in fact, even Ryan Fraser in his first game obviously helped us with a draw. So we would have got, so that's an extra point on top of this. So, the effort is not there from especially experienced heads. And I think like the whole team, the whole competition, like club needs to be torn down. All the players' contracts need to be put up, and we need to start from square one again. And maybe Ulrich will do that as a coach, but we got to start from square one again. And I feel like if we have to have changes to the board, do it. If we have to change the chairman in the competition for this club to turn things around, do it, because the effort is not there and it's pitiful. And I feel like you'd rather save your money in terms of going to games than watch the Wanderers men's team right now. Pitiful, and it pisses me off. And I hate ranting, alright? You've seen me rant a lot in this series, and especially with some of the games that the Wanderers have had, including this season. But you know what happened? I did it with the Wanderers team, the Wanderers women's team. I'm so rageful right now that I'm, flubbing on words. But I did it for the Wanderers women's team. And look what happened. They turned things around. Now, ultimately, I don't think this team, even if you had harsh words for them, I don't think they'd care. They just look at the money and just be like, yeah, no, we're good. And it's disgusting. Especially for every diehard fan that has been in this club since it started. All right? Someone like myself. Now, ultimately, I haven't won too many games, but ultimately, in terms of travel, it's easier, obviously, now. Obviously, where I'm living now. But obviously, when I was where I used to live, it was like 3 or 4 hours away, or maybe 5. Going to games like this was always a struggle. So, I know there's many diehard fans that have spent their money, like hard-earned money, like thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even close to hundreds of thousands for this club. And the effort they're putting out is not reflecting on those fans. In fact, it's spitting on them, which is pitiful. And I hate that. But yeah, 3-0. Congrats to Melbourne City for the win. 3 points. And yeah, there's 3 points available for Sydney FC, for Wellington Phoenix, and for Melbourne Victory, because I don't think they're going to win any more games this season. The Wanderers men's team, honestly, and it is absolutely disgusting. And the effort has not been there. Perth has put in some effort. Obviously, Brisbane fell apart, but they've had effort towards the start of the season. Wellington's been up and down and all over the place. Melbourne City's starting to ramp up as well, and obviously they've been in international competition as well, in the Champions League themselves, obviously the Asian Champions League, but they've been in it themselves. MacArthur's been up and down, they're up again. There's teams that have gone up and down. Even Jets this year, ultimately, they've been languishing towards the bottom of the ladder a lot over the last few years, and have finally come good with a good coach, with good team, with good morale, and they've already won 1 trophy already this year in terms of the Australian Cup, and now they're looking to get their first premiership plate in God knows how long, if not their first one ever for their franchise. So the effort's there for them. Why isn't it for the Wanderers? You got to wonder. And it's down to a lot of factors. And there's too many factors probably to even name. The coach at the moment is probably not one of them, honestly, because he's been thrust into an opportunity and into an absolute shit show and a tornado and a firestorm. And he's tried to make the best of it. And congrats Melbourne City, 3-0 over the Wanderers men's team. And next we'll talk about my Gold Coast Titans, obviously against Big Brother in terms of the Broncos, late Saturday night. And it was a 26-12 loss. Though it was looking up at halftime because it was only 8-6 and they were only in front by a penalty goal, actually. No, they scored 2 tries in the first half. There was a try, again, that was disallowed last night for the Titans as well, so that doesn't help things. Was to both Firma I'm not sure if it was a obstruction or anything like that. I didn't see what happened with that. But in fact, actually, I'll watch it now. Watching it. Yep. Yep. That's what it'll be for. It'll be for an obstruction. One, in fact, there might have almost been two. One either with tackle without the ball or the obstruction before that. But ultimately, Reece Walsh scored in the second minute. In fact, actually, in speaking of the Broncos were hit pretty heavily after the game because I think Reece Walsh was out. Adam Reynolds was out as well. There was a few players out, but I'm not sure about the other two. But at least it was those two during the game. Reece Walsh, I think it was like a facial fracture or something like that. But yeah, Reece Walsh scored in the second minute. Then Jojo Fafita actually scored in the 31st minute. Did convert. Both of those tries got converted. There was a penalty goal in the first half in the 27th minute. So it ended up being 8-6 at half time. And then we had Xavier Willison score for the Broncos. Then Shibasaki scored, Jesse Arthur scored, and Ezra Mam scored for the final try for the Broncos, and that one got converted. So they were actually only 2 for 5 in terms of converting, but obviously Adam Reynolds was out probably in the first half at some point. And then Jojo Fafita scored in the 78th minute. So in terms of penalty goals, like in terms of conversions, we, tied up with them. It's just that they scored 3 tries and a penalty goal in front of the Titans. So it's a 14-point loss. In terms of team stats, they actually had most of the possession of the game, 53% to the Titans. In terms of completion rate, it was 78% compared to 76%. I think it was just, it would have been line breaks and stuff like that, I'm assuming. 3 forced dropouts, which is great. But yeah, kick defusal, 36%, pretty average. 90% in terms of effective tackles, that's pretty good. 1 intercept, obviously for the Broncos, which I'm assuming is probably affected, which I think was actually the first try. I think maybe Reece Walsh got one from one. I haven't actually seen the highlights apart from obviously just watching the highlights of the both of them are no try because it went up to the bunker and they ruled it. But conceded penalties. There was 14 errors to the Wanderers, to the Titans. 1 more than the Broncos. They had 13. But penalties conceded was the Broncos 9-5. 7 ruck infringements to 2. 3 inside the 10 metres. 6 agains to 1. And 2 players on report for the Titans. So, in terms of the news, I could talk about that, but is it a video? It is a video. But so again, I will talk about the ladder a bit later on. Still in 16th position right now, with minus 64 as our for and against right now. But obviously there's a couple of games still to play the next couple of days. Obviously today it's the Sharks and the Warriors, the Knights and the Raiders play today, and then the Tigers and the Eels play tomorrow. So we'll see what happens with those games. But obviously still in 16th position because the Dragons also lost yesterday as well. They lost 32-0. So they still haven't won a game so far this season, and it's very lucky that we're off the bottom of the ladder with the win last week, obviously over them very late in that game. But yeah, I think the effort was there from the Titans. It's just that they got blown out. And the defense kind of let them down. There's probably quite a few errors as well. Again, there was obviously a no try overturned. A try that was overturned to no try again from the bunker. But not much I can do about it. Obviously, the referee last week did apologise during the midweek for getting a lot of calls wrong. He was stood down from obviously that game with the Dragons and the Titans, and the ref this week was not as good either. But we can't blame the referee because just going to play the way that we're playing on the field. It's one of those things. This week, obviously coming up, it'll be the Titans going down to Parramatta to play Parramatta. I believe that's a Sunday early game, and obviously out of daylight savings now, because obviously we're in daylight savings. So I believe that game is at 2, but it could be at 1. I am going to check the Titans app just to see what time it is, because obviously we were an hour ahead, so I don't know if that's the time going into it. It's 2 p.m. Yeah, it's 2 p.m. 2 p.m. game, so it is the early game of the 2 on Sunday. So hopefully we can get a win there. But obviously Parramatta, we'll see how they play on Monday, which obviously will be tomorrow. But we'll see what happens with that. Not much you can talk about. In fact, I actually might go with a impromptu table count, because obviously I'll be working on Tuesday. So we'll probably get the episode out before that game even plays. But we'll let you know what's going on. But 14-point loss to the Titans, to the Brisbane Broncos, but the effort was there, unlike the Wanderers men's team. And I know I'm going to probably rant about that a lot this episode, but it's been a bit of a train wreck. But thankfully, at least for the Titans, it's looking like it's going to go up. But we'll see what happens. And speaking of a rollercoaster weekend, we got to talk about Liverpool, because obviously we always seem to be in a way of going up and down, all over the place when it comes to Liverpool. A really good roller coaster at that sometimes. Obviously in the FA Cup, obviously back from international break, Manchester City, Liverpool, quarter-final of the FA Cup at Etihad Stadium. And unfortunately for Liverpool, it was a loss, and it was a heavy loss at that. It was 4-0 to Manchester City over Liverpool. So Liverpool did not score a goal at all in the game, and they had opportunities to do so and did not do that. Was 50.6% possession to 49.4% in terms of possession in favour of Liverpool. In terms of discipline, three yellow cards apiece. Defence, relatively one in Manchester City's favour. In terms of passing accuracy, just under 89.3% to Melbourne. Again, done it second week in a row. Manchester City, 59.2% to Liverpool. So very close in terms of that. Obviously shots. In terms of total, 9 shots to 8. 7 shots on target to 5. It was the 4 goals. But the first one obviously was from a spot kick. Virgil van Dijk took one of the attacking players from Manchester City down in the box. So Erling Haaland scored in the 39th minute. He also scored again in the second minute of stoppage time in the first half. So it was 2-0 at halftime. And Semenyo put it up 3-0 in the 50th minute, and then Haaland ended up getting his hat-trick in the 57th minute. And then not a lot of stuff happened, a few yellow cards here and there towards the end of the second half. But that's it. That's it for Liverpool in the FA Cup in terms of that competition. So they have a situation where they could win 2 trophies possibly, but a lot of things would have to go their way, obviously, to win in the Premier League. So most likely that one is gone at this point. It probably was gone quite a few weeks ago. So it's only really the Champions League left. And obviously they're in the semis in that, in terms of the quarters. quarterfinals in that against a really tough opponent, and we'll talk about that in a second. In terms of other results that are notable, Chelsea won 7-0 over Port Vale. So in terms of second tier and lower teams in the competition, another one is out, but not all of them, because we have Southampton. They ended up winning over Arsenal 2-1. Got a goal very late, 5 minutes at the end of the game, 5 minutes from the end of regulation. So it ended up being a 2-1 win for them. And it makes it 15 games unbeaten for Southampton. Obviously, they've got a chance. They've got a game in hand in the championship right now, just outside of the top six. They're on the same amount of points as Wrexham right now. Actually, no, I think Wrexham actually might be a point ahead, obviously, with the draw to Blackburn. At this point in time, obviously Sunday morning, I think Southampton has still got to play on Monday or Tuesday, UK time. And they actually play, I believe their next game is against Wrexham. So they've also got a game in hand, obviously, against Portsmouth. So it is a very, very important game for them, this next game in the championship, because they're fighting for a spot at the bottom of the top six in the championship. Obviously, the top two automatically go through to the Premier League, and obviously 3, 4, 5, and 6 positions will all be playing in a playoff for that last spot for promotion into the Premier League. So very important for obviously for Southampton, because they're in the mix. They're in 7th position right now. But obviously great win for them. For Arsenal, that's another trophy dropped, going from a quadruple to a treble to possibly the double if they win the Champions League and the Premier League. So ultimately some focus is off that for Arsenal, but they really need to turn things around, because that's 2 games in a row with trophies on the line that they've lost, and it's not going to be any easier. Obviously, they got Champions League games coming up, including us as well. In terms of Liverpool, we play against PSG in Paris on Thursday morning at 5 a.m. my time. Now, obviously, the daylight savings is finished, so very, very big game for Liverpool, especially with the travel, and need to turn things around from a 4-0 deficit to really play against last year's Champions League champions. Really need to turn things around in that, because PSG will not hold off. They will absolutely hit us with everything that they have. And then obviously on Sunday my time, we'll also be playing Fulham 2:30 in the morning. So very, very important, both games. Obviously PSG will play again on the Wednesday after at Anfield, so we'll have obviously the return leg in terms of that, but very important. And then obviously leading into a Merseyside derby away from Anfield, going to Everton's new ground in the Dickinson Stadium, I should say, because obviously last year obviously played at their previous ground for the last time in terms of Merseyside derby. So we're at the new stadium, obviously, for Everton in the second of the Merseyside derbies this season, and hopefully we can come away with a couple of wins before we head into Crystal Palace at the end of this month. So, but obviously Champions League is the focus now in terms of the next game coming up. Obviously we have to probably focus on Premier League as well, but obviously the main focus right now is Champions League and the double legs, the 2-leg games in the quarterfinals against PSG. Because if we don't turn things around very quickly, we will get absolutely belted by PSG. They did that against Chelsea last game in the double legs that they had in the round of 16, and they will not relent. They are just as strong, if not a little bit stronger this season. And honestly, with the teams that are left, it could be anyone's game, including obviously, yes, Arsenal. Obviously, they're still in, but Arsenal's road to a Champions League win is not going to be easy either. But obviously 4-0 loss in the FA Cup quarterfinals, 4-0 to Manchester City, and Liverpool go out in the quarterfinals of another domestic trophy, which is pretty pitiful. But obviously, all things considered, got to focus on Champions League now, and obviously the Premier League, and trying to finish strong in a position to try and make that top 4 spot. And every game counts at this point, and it will for Liverpool. Every single game will count, going from this next game with PSG, the first of the quarterfinals, all the way to the end of the season. Every single game matters at this point for Liverpool. If they want any shot at any trophy, every game counts. So, yeah, got to turn this thing around very quickly. And now we'll talk about the Liverpool women's team. It's Monday morning when I'm doing this. Obviously, the game was last night, very late last night. I, in fact, watched probably about half of the second half, and it was a 1-0 win for Liverpool over Charlton Athletic in the FA Cup quarterfinals, so that means that they went to the semi-finals. Though it did go to extra time. It was 0 at half time. There was a few chances throughout the game for both teams, more so for Liverpool than it was for Charlton Athletic, but they also had their opportunities as well. And it went 0-0 at half time. Went 0-0 at the end of the first half of extra time. Though there was obviously some more opportunities for both clubs to score, and it was in the 115th minute, so that's 5 minutes before the end of the second period of extra time, before any stoppage time or anything like that. Zara Shaw, who ultimately is an 18-year-old, come off the bench in extra time. She's been out for over a year with an ACL injury. And she contributed to the goal in the 115th minute, though it did bounce around in the box quite a few times, a few headers. One that was a header off, off one of the Liverpool players, come off the head, actually come off the crossbar just before the goal was scored. So it bounced around in the box quite a few times, but there was a few opportunities, obviously, from both clubs, and in fact, Charlton Athletic played relatively well, considering that the possession was heavily favoured in Liverpool's favour in that, because ultimately it was pretty crazy. 75.3% to 24.7% it ended up being at the end of the game. But again, they might not have had too much possession, but in terms of it, Liverpool were a little bit inaccurate in terms of a lot of things. Obviously, it was 5 shots for Charlton Athletic to 16 shots for Liverpool, but Liverpool only put 4 on target, so there was a lot that was missed. There's 3 shots that hit off the woodwork for Liverpool and 1 for Charlton Athletic, so there was quite a few that come off there. Passing accuracy, 89% for Liverpool, 63.2% for Charlton Athletic. In terms of corners, it was 10-1 in Liverpool's favour, so there was quite a lot. 3 yellow cards for Charlton Athletic, 1 for Liverpool. But ultimately, of course, the be-all, end-all of that was Zara scoring the go-ahead goal for the FA Cup. Now, obviously, there's 2 more games to play. I believe they play either tonight or tomorrow. But I will say, Arsenal, the Arsenal women's team, after going through to the Champions League, I believe they're going to the semi-finals in that. They lost 2-0 in the FA Cup quarterfinals to Brighton. So back-to-back losses for Arsenal this week for the men's and the women's team. So it sets up a semi-final spot. Though we don't know who is going to play. Obviously, Brighton is one of the teams that's in there. I believe it's Man United and Birmingham City, I think, is playing in one of them. There's quite a few teams that are still left in this. Let me have a look, see if I can find it. Does it actually say? it goes to the Liverpool website, so it'll be ball number 1. That's the only thing it really says. Have I got? There we go. I should be able to go to the FA Cup website, because obviously it has the results for both the men's and the women's. Competitions, Women's FA Cup, fixtures. Because I was trying to watch the game yesterday because it wasn't really giving me too much in terms of it. So Manchester City and Birmingham City are playing each other, and Chelsea is playing Tottenham in the other game. So it'll be one of those 4 sides, obviously adding to Liverpool and Brighton in the final 4. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. But obviously 1-0 for Liverpool, the Liverpool women's team, very important. Obviously, we go back to the Women's League. We play against West Ham on the 26th of April. So they have a little bit of a break at the moment, a couple of weeks until the rest of the season plays out, because they've only got 3 games left. They've got West Ham, they've got Manchester City on May the 3rd, and May 16th they have Arsenal. So going to be interesting to see. Obviously that's around FA Cup qualification, which obviously they're through the semis, so that those games have not been added in, or that game has not been added back into the fixtures yet. But so they have technically 3 games in the Women's Super League left, but that's not counting the FA Cup semi-final game that they're going to play. So they've at least played 1 more game this season to make it 4 for the rest of it. If not, obviously play in the final, which will make it 5 games left for them. But obviously 1-0, went to extra time. Thought possibly it was going to go to penalties, because there was few and far opportunities in the game in particular. But they played relatively well, so can't say much about it, other than it was a win, which is hard to come by because there wasn't many of those this week. Alright, now let's go over some miscellaneous stuff. We'll talk about the Cubs at the end, because they're still playing their second game right now, because they had a doubleheader, because the first game, which was the Saturday game, which was yesterday's game, got washed out. So we had a double header today, and they're still playing at the moment. We'll talk about the A-League Women's competition. So obviously they're finished. They've finished the regular season now. So we'll go over the final table before finals. So the Melbourne City is on top. They win the Premier's Plate with 40 points. Second position is Wellington Phoenix, their first ever foray into the final series in A-League Women's history for them. So fantastic result for them. Congratulations to them. They ended up getting second, so they also get a home final as well, home double leg semi-final with 34 points. Third position is Canberra United with 31 points. In fourth position is Brisbane Roar with that win in Canberra. Solidified their spot in the final series also on 31 points. Just obviously the goal difference was the difference between third and fourth position. Canberra had +6 on their for and again and their goal difference. Brisbane had -2. So that's the difference there. A few goals in it. Fifth position is Adelaide United with 30 points. And sixth position with 28 points is Melbourne Victory. So that's your top 6. They're your finals series teams. Seventh position, also on 28 points, is the Central Coast Mariners. The Mariners actually had to win to get in to the final series, but obviously they drew with Sydney FC, of course, which forced Sydney FC off the bottom. And with that, by 2 goals. 2 goals in it. The difference of 2 goals. They were in front they have +1 on their goal difference. Melbourne Victory had +3. So by 2 goals, they miss out on finals. So they'd be kicking themselves, very, very much so, with that draw against Sydney FC as well. Obviously, Wanderers would be kicking them as well, but they'd be kicking themselves because they've just went from obviously champions for last season to just missing out by goal difference into the final series the next season. So it's pretty disappointing on their part, especially missing by that much. Obviously, with the Wanderers, we kind of know the result for that. 8th position is Perth Glory with 24 points. Then Newcastle Jets in 9th position with 23, though they were in front against Melbourne City by a couple of goals, and Melbourne City turned it around and actually won that game in particular. So they ended up getting no points out of that. 10th position, obviously, Sydney FC with 19, and also on 19 points in the last position with the wooden spoon is the Wanderers by 5 goals in terms of their goal difference there. In terms of the A-League men's competition, we do have one extra game to go this week. In terms of the men's, obviously that'll be tomorrow when I'm recording this. It'll be the make-up game for the Mariners and Melbourne City, which will make that a full 23 games all together for all the clubs. But at the moment, obviously with that game in hand, it's Newcastle on top with 43 in the men's competition with 43 points. Second position is Auckland FC with 40. They ended up getting a draw. Newcastle ended up losing, so that kind of shook things up a little bit. Though there was supposed to be, I would think that there would have been a call against one of the Auckland players. I think got a free kick when they shouldn't have, or there was a red card that was not given, something like that along the lines. Very much like Arsenal did in the Women's Champions League as well. There wasn't a card that was given for a hair pull, which have done that before in the women's competition, so I was a bit surprised. Third position at the moment is Adelaide United with 36 points. Fourth position is Melbourne Victory with 35. Sydney FC in fifth position with 34. And then Macarthur Bulls on 31 points in sixth position. That's your top 6. Wellington, obviously with a couple of wins on the trot, moved to 30 points in seventh position. Melbourne City with their comprehensive win over the Wanderers and moved to 29 points in 8th position. Mariners in 9th with 28. 10th position is Brisbane Roar with 25. Perth Glory on 24 points in 11th position. And 21 points for the Wanderers on the bottom in 12th position in last place. So, yes. So, the Wanderers women's team is done. We've obviously got a Sydney derby this week on Saturday. Probably won't actually watch that game because I'm not really watching the Wanderers play relatively right now because they're pretty incomprehensive right now and have no heart in their club at all. We'll go over the incomplete tables when it comes to the NRL and the AFL. Obviously, we got games today playing. We've got the Tigers and the Eels playing today in the NRL, so they'll have results that'll kind of change in their regard. And we have the Hawks and the Cats playing in the AFL. So the tables for those will be incomplete, obviously, because I want to get this video out. Because obviously I'm working tomorrow. I won't be able to put it out tomorrow in terms of recording. Obviously recording this Monday morning. So Penrith on top with 10 points. They're still unbeaten. Newcastle with a really good win yesterday, moving to second position with four wins, 1 loss. And South Sydney in third position with 8 points as well, with the bye, 3 wins, 1 draw. 3 wins, 1 loss rather. In third position, Warriors lost So they dropped to 4th position. West Tigers moved to 5th position, but obviously could move up as high. Let me have a look. They got plus 42 on their for and against right now. So they could move into 2nd position if they do win today against the Eels. 6th position is Cronulla Sharks. And West Tigers would have to lose pretty heavily to drop out of 5th position at this point in time. But obviously, it can happen. We have seen it happen before, but 7th position is the Cowboys, North Queensland, with a win for themselves, 3 wins, 2 losses, and then rounding out the top 8 is the Brisbane Broncos, obviously with a win over the Titans on the weekend. Bulldogs dropped right down to 9th position with a loss. They lost to South Sydney. 10th position is Sydney Roosters. 11th position, right down in 11th position, is Melbourne Storm, which is crazy. It's pretty early, I know, but we don't usually see Melbourne outside the top 8, especially that low, very often. In terms of that, Manly in 12th position rather, with 4 points. Obviously got a win against the Dolphins, which was unexpected. And speaking of the Dolphins, they dropped to 13th position, so they almost switched positions. And the Dolphins obviously lost a couple because they were in 8th at the end of last week. And then Parramatta in 14th position, but obviously could jump. If they win pretty heavily, obviously they get 6 points. They could possibly jump into, and they'd probably jump into 11th with a win. But if they win heavily, they could jump the Roosters. They're on minus 58 right now, minus 35 in terms of for and against for the Roosters, and minus 11 for the Bulldogs. So they'd have to win pretty heavily to get into 9th position, but possibly just going to be in 11th with a win. With that, in 15th position is the Gold Coast Titans. So yes, despite losing by a decent amount of points, the Titans actually jump a spot over another opposition team, minus 64 in terms of their for and against, because Canberra ended up dropping, obviously losing heavily against Newcastle. They dropped to 16th position with minus 69 on their for and against. Very nice. Sorry, going to say a joke. I'm sorry. But yeah, so minus five extra points for them. Drops them under the Titans, and obviously still in last place with no wins so far is the St. George Illawarra Dragons, and they play Manly. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with them. It's going to be an interesting week for them to see what happens with them. In terms of the AFL table, obviously this also is not complete yet, but on top is now the Western Bulldogs with a win over Essendon. Second position is the Sydney Swans with a heavy percentage booster win over West Coast in the West. Third position is Gold Coast Suns. They finally lost a game. They lost against Melbourne yesterday in a pretty close game. They lost by 20 points, so pretty unfortunate, but they dropped from first to third, so it's not too bad. And then rounding out the top four at the present moment, and probably will stay that way unless they get a big percentage booster, in terms of one of the teams we'll talk about in a second, is Fremantle, also on 12 points. North Melbourne in 5th position on 12, and 6th position is Melbourne Demons right now. Obviously, one of the teams we had to talk about is in 7th position. That's Hawthorn. If they do win today, they will jump into 5th position. But if they do win by a decent chunk in terms of percentage, they could obviously even jump into the top 4 because they're only like 15% behind Fremantle at the moment. Is that right? Yeah, 15.3%. I wasn't even doing the math in my head, and I managed to get it right. So they could jump into 5th position. Obviously, they could jump as high as 4th position. But unless they win heavily against the Cats, they won't jump into 3rd. There's no 3rd or 2nd, because Sydney are in front by 182.9 in terms of their percentage, and Gold Coast is 152.6, whereas Fremantle obviously is 133.4, with Hawthorns being 118.1 at the moment, obviously with that game in hand. But they're in 7th position right now. Port Adelaide jump into 8th position. Brisbane Lions also won, so they jump into 9th. Collingwood, obviously facing them, dropped to 10th position, so they basically switch positions there. Geelong in 11th position, but obviously could jump into the top 8, into the top 10, and could actually jump into 7th position, or as high as 7th or 6th position with a big percentage booster and a win. But they're in 11th right now. West Coast dropped to 12th position. Adelaide Crows in 13th. St Kilda in 14th, obviously with the bye. Carlton jump into 15th position, only just. In fact, it's actually by 4 points, because the percentage is exactly the same as the Giants. So the Giants dropped to 16th position, obviously being on the bye this week. But Carlton have actually scored 4 more points in total this season compared to the Giants. So that's why they jumped them in terms of percentage, in terms of ladder position. 307 points they've scored this year. We've scored 303 points so far. So 4 points difference between those two teams. Essendon in 17th position and with no wins, and also with no wins is Richmond on the bottom with 56.1% compared to 62.7% for Essendon. So obviously Geelong could jump into the top 10 with a win, obviously, and Hawthorn could possibly jump in the top 4, if not 5th or 6th position with a win for themselves today. So that's going to be very interesting. In terms of that, we'll talk about the Cubs now. Obviously, Liverpool obviously got Champions League. They've also got Premier League this week as well. The women obviously don't play for a couple of weeks. We'll talk about obviously the Cubs because they're still in a game right now. In fact, it's actually into the last inning for them in particular, and it's heating up a little bit. But their week this week has been pretty crazy. We'll go back a week. Can we go back? So they ended up winning the series against the Angels after losing the first series, obviously at home against the Nationals. So they won. So I'll go back a game. So they lost 6-3 in the last game. Then it was 7-2. In terms of a win against the Angels in the first game. It's 2-0 to the Angels in the second game, and it was 6-2 in the third game for the Cubs. So it was 2-1 win for them. Then obviously on Friday they lost to the Guardians 4-1. Obviously the postponement, obviously from yesterday's game, but they did win today 1-0, 1-0. In the first game, which obviously would have been yesterday's game, and they're up. So they're actually down 2 runs at the moment with their last out in the top of the 9th inning. So thankfully they've had 2 walks, which has definitely helped in this game. But again, in terms of the box score, they're actually in front 3. So they're in front by 1 run. In the top of the third, then they scored 2 more in the top of the 6th, and that's when the relievers come in. They come in a little bit before in the bottom of the 6th. Ben Brown gave up 3 runs in that game in particular, in that inning. to tie it up. They did get one in the top of the 8th to go ahead again. And then obviously one of the other pitches ended up was Webb let in another 3 in the bottom of the 8th. So they're in front by 6 runs to 4. We actually had a situation where we've actually got a run just come in. So we've got one player on third and one player on first right now. So game is in the balance right now. So could see what happens. Obviously, their record at the moment is 4-4. But we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, I'll talk about the end of the game just when it actually does finish. But at the moment, they're in the balance right now in terms of the series, in terms of Cleveland and their first away series as well, because obviously they're playing Cleveland. In terms of games coming up, they do play against the Rays, and I believe they play the Rays. They play at Tropicana Field. Now, obviously, in terms of Tropicana Field, obviously with the whole hurricane situation from the start of this year and the end of last year, they've got artificial turf on there right now. And Tropicana, I'm surprised it looks as good as it does, because it went through a hell of a lot through that hurricane that come through there. Obviously, we'll play the next 3 games against the Rays on Monday, on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, but obviously that's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for me. Then obviously going to the 9th, they have the day off on the 9th, then they play back at home. Do they play at home? Yes, they play at home against obviously the division rivals in the Pirates for 3 games. Then play the Phillies, I believe, also at home at Wrigley Field. No, they play in Philadelphia. So they immediately travel on Tuesday, my time, next week. So not this week coming, but next week they play against the Phillies. So they play, obviously, the Rays. Then we'll play the Pirates, who the Pirates actually playing relatively well, actually, in terms of that. They had pretty bad record at the end of last year, but they're at 6-3 right now, so they're actually doing pretty good in terms of their record right now, and they're actually doing really well. And there we go. There's the strings strikeout. God fucking damn it. So yeah. So the relievers. In terms of the game, and it wasn't actually Shota's fault. Imanga, I'm not sure that's actually how you pronounce his last name, but he wasn't the issue, because they didn't actually run. They didn't score any runs until after the first relief pitcher come in. So in terms of the bullpen was the reason we lost this game, giving up 6 runs. Yes, obviously, Shota did end up giving up a double before he got taken out of the game, but there's no excuse for that in terms of giving up 6 runs as relievers. I know they played 2 games today, but I'm sure a lot of the relievers were not in the first game in terms of pitching for... Yeah, no, none of the relievers were the ones that were pitching in the second game, so I don't understand. But, that makes us go 4-5 on the season so far. And I think we're still, in terms of division, I think we're still in last. Yes, we will be. We still will be in last position. Well, at least we're not on the bottom in terms of our wild card, but we're a game behind right now. If the playoffs were going on right now, in terms of the National League, it'd be Milwaukee and the Dodgers and the Miami Marlins. should be Florida Marlins, but anyway. But Miami Marlins, they'd be the top 3 leaders. And then in terms of the wild card spots, it'd be Pittsburgh Pirates, the Reds, Cincinnati Reds. So that's, yes, 3 division rivals going in there. The Mets and the Braves would be the 7 teams in terms of that, whereas it'd be the Yankees, obviously in front with the best record so far, 7 wins, 1 loss. Houston and Cleveland would be the top 3 in the American League, with Detroit, the Royals, and the Angels and the Mariners would be the top 7 for that. So, yeah, it's a bit unfortunate in terms of that, but obviously in terms of the wildcards, yeah, it would be obviously the Mets would be in, and the Angels would be in, I think, by runs. No, because they just won their last game, but I think it was away from home, so they actually did well. But yeah, in terms of the division, yeah, we're still in last in our division right now. It's not ideal, but hopefully we can heat up relatively soon against the Rays. That would be great, but yeah, pretty disappointing from the relievers in this game. But with all that said, sorry for the rambling. Sorry for, obviously, the rant I did earlier in the episode. I apologise, but, obviously you get flustered when you care about a team and then just not performing well. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Man 100. Guys, have a great day or night, and of course, take care.